Hi friends, this tour was prepared by Miss Marge, who is a docent at the Muskegon Museum of Art. A docent is a teacher at a museum. They can take you on tours and teach you lots of great things about the artworks on display. Today, on our virtual tour at the Muskegon Museum of Art, we will be talking about portraits. A portrait is an image of a person. It can be a photograph, a print, a drawing, a painting, or a sculpture. It can be a bust showing just the person's head and neck, or it can show more, all the way down to the toes. You have been the subject of portraits since the day you were born. The hospital photographer took your portrait in a crib wearing a cute little pink or blue cap and swaddled in a blanket. Since then, your parents have taken your portrait on every birthday, first day of school, and other special days with cameras or smartphones. You may even have taken your own selfie portrait. But what if your mom or dad was an artist like Francois Gillot? Aurelia, the girl in this artwork, was the daughter of the famous artist Francois Gillot, and lots of beautiful portraits were created in her image. Francois Gillot made several portraits of all three of her children, actually, and the bust pictured here really shows off Aurelia's personality with the warm orange and yellow colors that Gillot chooses for her hat and dress. Notice the happy squares and circles that dance around her dress and hat brim, and the friendly expression on her face. This print doesn't show Aurelia as realistically as a photograph would, no, but instead, Gillot used simple lines to sketch a friendly young girl with a warm personality. She looks like someone that we might want for a friend. The next artwork is also a bust, but it's not a two-dimensional picture like Aurelia. It's a sculpture. The second artwork we'll look at is also a bust like the one before. It is called Glory and is a sculpture made out of bronze by the artist Elizabeth Catlett. This is a portrait of a woman named Glory Van Scott. Glory Van Scott was a talented dancer, actress, teacher, and civic activist who lived in Chicago in the late 1900s. Elizabeth Catlett, the artist who made this sculpture, was good friends with Glory. Since we can walk around a sculpture, we can see it from all sides. In this front view, we see that her hair is parted down the middle and pulled back. If you could get closer, you'd see that her left eye is defined with an imprint of a dove. From the side view, we see a profile view of Glory, which shows her hair pulled into a neat bun and a small earring. We might call her hairdo and earring attributes, meaning they tell you something about the subject. In Glory's case, they suggest simple dignity. From Glory's profile, we can appreciate the difference in texture between her smooth skin and the curly strands of her textured hair. Catlett's sculpture shows just how beautiful she thought Glory was. This colorful portrait is more than a bust and less than a full-length portrait. It's called Woman with Watch by William James Glackens. Here's a bit of detective work for you. Can you find her watch? One of the main attributes in this painting? If you guessed it was on the lanyard around her neck, you are right. The watch in the woman's fancy dress with the lace collar and cuffs and fluffy afghan on the arm of her chair are all attributes that show us this woman is well off. The painting style is impressionistic rather than realistic, which means the artist meant not to stay inside the lines. So it's harder to identify small things. The artist is giving the impression of a watch without being too specific about it. The next artist used color in a very different way from Mr. Glackens. I'll bet you notice it right away. You can see from this portrait that artists can show as much or as little of their subject as they choose. It depends on their vision. The artist who painted this portrait, called Study in Rose and Brown, is James Abbott McNeill Whistler, a very important American artist. Notice how tightly Whistler has framed this girl. In length, he's shown enough to include her folded arms, but unlike Woman with Watch, he shows us very little background and no attributes. Whistler's not trying to show you something about the girl, he's trying to show you something about color. The little girl's name is Rose, and she was a neighbor of Whistler. Except for her skin and the rosy blush in her cheeks and lips, the rest of the color in the painting is brown. But look, there are different shades of brown. The brown of her hair has a little gold in it, and the brown of her dress has a little of the rose of her cheeks and lips. And the brown of the background is an even different shade of brown. Most of the painting is different shades or tones of brown. Whistler didn't call this painting a portrait of Rose. He called it a study in rose and brown. He used the girl's name to suggest what colors he used when he painted it, and he wanted to keep our focus on color. So far, we've seen portraits of ordinary people who have been close to the artist or who the artist found fascinating. Our next portrait is of a very important man named Martin Luther, who changed the course of history. And for that reason, the artist Lucas Cranach the Elder wanted to paint him. Martin Luther lived in Germany 500 years ago. He was important because he wanted to remove some bad practices of church leaders at the time. He also translated the Bible from Latin to German so that everyday people could read the Bible for themselves. His changes made the Pope so angry that he was locked out of the church and soldiers were sent out to arrest him. Luckily, Lucas Cranach helped hide him. And in the end, Luther's brave efforts made important changes to the church and established Protestant churches. Lucas Cranach was an important artist and printer who painted many portraits of Martin Luther. And this one shows him dressed as Knight George. And Knight George was a disguise that Martin Luther used during the time he was hiding from those who wanted to hurt him. Some of Luther's attributes are his beard, and Knight George's robe, and the sword hilt on which he rests his right hand. Our last portrait is of our very own important person, Charles Hackley, and it shows in every way just how important he is to us. It's so large that it shows nearly all of him, and it has many attributes that confirm his importance. The artist who painted Mr. Hackley's portrait is Edwin A. Turner, a well-known portrait artist in the West Michigan area in the 1800s. He was especially active in Muskegon and Grand Rapids, and many of the prominent and wealthy people who lived here wanted him to paint their portraits. Mr. Hackley was no exception. The painting was probably done in his office. The attributes that show his position as a businessman are many. For example, there is the large desk with papers and books, the inkwell and pen, the newspaper, his business suit and well-trimmed beard, his diamond ring, cufflinks, and tie chain all speak to his wealth. Unlike A Study in Rose and Brown and Woman with Watch, and even Aurelia, this portrait shows Mr. Hackley as realistically as possible. If he came back to life and walked across Hackley Park, you'd recognize him. You might also recognize Glory and Martin Luther if he didn't shave his beard. The artist's vision or purpose makes all the difference. You probably won't see any of the people in these portraits walking down the street or through Hackley Park, but we hope you visit them whenever you come to the Muskegon Museum of Art. Thank you for joining us.